I never imagined I'd be telling this story, much less living it. For most of my adult life, I prided myself on doing the right thing. I was a mother, a grandmother, and now, after years of loneliness, a wife again. At 58, I had settled into a quiet rhythm with Thomas, my second husband, a kind man who brought stability and calm where my first marriage had been chaos. Our home was modest but serene, perched on the edge of a sleepy town where the loudest sound most days was birdsong and the wind rustling the trees. Thomas was a good man, though not an expressive one. He was steady, predictable, the kind of man who folded his napkin before rising from the dinner table and read the newspaper every morning without fail. He loved me, I knew, but he was a man of few words. Conversations between us were mostly functional. Grocery lists, weather updates, reminders about doctor's appointments. I didn't complain. After my ex-husband's explosive temper and wandering eye, Thomas's quiet presence felt like safety. Then Richard arrived. He was Thomas's grandson from his first marriage, technically my step-grandson, though that title always felt unnecessarily formal. I hadn't met him until a few months ago. Thomas hadn't seen much of Richard over the years either. His son, Richard's father, had taken a job overseas decades ago, and the family ties had gradually thinned to the point of near invisibility. But one night, over a quiet dinner, Thomas mentioned that Richard had recently gone through a nasty divorce and needed a place to get back on his feet. "Just a few weeks," Thomas said, sipping his tea. "The boys had a rough go. Lost his house. His job's in limbo. He needs family now." I nodded, not out of obligation, but because I knew what heartbreak felt like. I remembered the isolation after my first marriage collapsed, how people treated me like a broken plate they didn't know how to glue back together. I wouldn't let Richard feel that kind of abandonment. If our home could offer him even a little peace, it was worth it. He arrived on a rainy afternoon, tall and lean with tired eyes and a smile that looked practiced but still polite. His presence shifted the air immediately. He hugged Thomas stiffly, then turned to me with a warmth I hadn't expected. "Thank you for letting me stay, Margaret. I hope I'm not a burden." "No burden at all," I said, genuinely. "We're glad you're here." And for the first few days, I was. He was considerate, helped with dishes, offered to cook, and even cleaned out the garage without being asked. I found myself smiling more. He filled the silence that Thomas never quite managed to break. What surprised me most, however, was how easily Richard and I talked. Late in the evening, once Thomas had gone to bed, Richard and I would linger in the kitchen. He'd sit at the table with a cup of herbal tea, and I'd dry the last of the dishes. He spoke of his marriage, of Lily, his ex-wife, and how she left. Him for her manager at work. He wasn't bitter, just exhausted. "She said I was too emotionally shut down," he murmured one night, staring into his tea. "Funny thing is, I was just trying to hold it together. You know?" I nodded, though I didn't entirely. Still, I understood the ache of being unseen. One night, after he'd finished telling me about the therapy sessions he and Lily had tried, he looked at me for a long time. Not in the way a grandson looks at his step-grandmother. There was something searching in his gaze, something almost hungry for understanding. "You listen better than anyone I've met in years," he said softly. His words warmed me and unsettled me all at once. I brushed it off with a chuckle. "I suppose age makes you patient." "No," he said. "It's not just patience. It's the way you look at me when I talk, like it matters." That night, I lay awake next to Thomas, staring at the ceiling. His breath was slow and rhythmic beside me. My body was there, but my mind was still in that kitchen, sipping tea and listening to a young man speak truths I wasn't sure he even meant to share. I told myself it was innocent. Just a connection, something human, something harmless. But deep inside, something had shifted. A door had quietly opened, and I wasn't sure I had the strength or the will to close it. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. I told myself I was imagining things, that Richard was just grateful, that I was reading too much into his words, his glances, his lingering presence. But denying something doesn't make it untrue. The atmosphere between us was charged, subtly but unmistakably. I began noticing how he'd wait in the kitchen until I came in, how his conversations with Thomas grew shorter while ours deepened. He'd ask me what music I liked, what I used to dream about when I was younger, whether I believed people could fall in love twice in one lifetime. There was something disarming about him, something dangerously tender beneath the surface. One evening, after a particularly long conversation about his regrets, he reached across the table and touched my hand. It was brief, a passing brush, but I felt it in my spine. I withdrew instinctively, pretending to adjust the sleeve of my cardigan. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I busied myself with cleaning, gardening, anything that would keep me away from the house. But I couldn't ignore the memory of his touch, nor the way he looked at me. Not like a grandson, not even like a friend. It was different. And worse, I had felt something too. Not love, no, but a dangerous kind of validation. A woman who had long felt invisible was suddenly being seen. That weekend, Thomas left to visit an old friend in the next town, planning to stay overnight. I'd insisted he go, almost eagerly. I told myself I wanted the solitude, a quiet evening, with a book and some chamomile tea. But as the door closed behind him, a part of me knew that solitude wasn't what I feared. It was what might happen in its absence. Around 9 p.m., I found myself in the kitchen again, the soft hum of the dishwasher filling the silence. Richard walked in, barefoot, holding a half-empty glass of red wine. "You're still up?" he said, leaning against the counter. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, avoiding eye contact. He sat down at the table, motioning for me to join him. I hesitated. Then, against my better judgment, I poured myself a small glass and sat across from him. We talked for a while, about nothing in particular. The weather, books, memories, the kind of idle conversation that hides unspoken tension. Then he said, if you weren't married to my grandfather, I'd probably be falling for you." I stared at him, stunned into silence. "You're smart," he continued. "Kind, elegant. You listen. You make people feel like they matter. I haven't had that in a long time." "Richard," I whispered, a warning more than a response. "You're confused. This isn't—" "I'm not confused," he said, leaning forward. "I know exactly what I feel, and I think you feel it too." I opened my mouth to deny it, but no words came. The room suddenly felt too small. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I stood up, intending to walk away, to end it before something irreversible happened. But as I turned, his hand caught mine. Not forcefully, but firmly enough to stop me. I should have pulled away. I should have run. Instead, I let him kiss me. It was slow, deliberate, and full of a longing that had no business existing. When I finally stepped back, breathless and ashamed, I couldn't look him in the eye. I need to go to bed," I muttered, fleeing the kitchen. Behind the safety of my bedroom door, I leaned against the frame, my legs trembling beneath me. I'd crossed a line, one I never thought I'd even approach. This wasn't just poor judgment. This was betrayal. When Thomas returned the next day, nothing had visibly changed. I greeted him with a smile, helped unpack his overnight bag, and asked about his visit. On the surface, I was the same woman, but inside, I was unraveling. Richard, for his part, kept his distance. No words were exchanged about the kiss, no stolen glances, no teasing remarks. It was as if it never happened, and yet it had. Silence between us was no longer innocent. It was charged, heavy, and volatile. Each day that passed felt like a countdown I couldn't read. The kiss may have been brief, but its weight lingered like smoke in the air, impossible to see, yet suffocating. I tried to go about life as though nothing had changed, but everything had. Every corner of the house felt haunted by what I had done, what we had done. The guilt clung to me, relentless and cold. Richard, meanwhile, acted like nothing had happened. He was polite, helpful, distant in all the ways that mattered. At first, I welcomed the distance. I hoped the silence meant it was over, that he, like me, recognized the danger and chose to retreat. But distance can be deceptive. Beneath his calm surface, something was shifting. One morning, as I folded laundry in the den, he walked in without knocking. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me too long before speaking. "Are we going to keep pretending?" he asked, his tone low, insistent. I didn't look up. "There's nothing to pretend. It was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened." He stepped closer. "But it did. And I think you wanted it just as much as I did." I finally met his eyes. "That doesn't make it right." His jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but it was real." That word, real, hit me harder than I expected, because it had felt real. That moment of connection, of being wanted, of being alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. But reality has consequences, and this one was already corroding the foundation of my marriage, my self-respect, my peace. I turned away from him, folding the last towel with shaking hands. "It can't happen again, Richard. You need to let it go." For a while, I thought he might. But over the next few days, his behavior shifted again, this time into something darker. He became possessive in subtle ways. He questioned where I went, who I spoke to, even how often I spoke with Thomas. What began as flirtation curdled into control. Then came the threat. It was a Sunday afternoon. Thomas had gone to the hardware store. I was in the garden, trimming the roses, when Richard approached me with that same practiced charm I'd first admired, but his smile faded as he knelt beside me. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been healing," I replied. "You should do the same." He tilted his head. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe I should talk to Grandpa, clear the air, tell him everything." I froze, pruning shears suspended midair. "You wouldn't," I whispered. "Wouldn't I?" he said, voice soft but menacing. "I'm tired of sneaking around like I did something wrong. Maybe he deserves to know the truth." My heart pounded. Whether it was a bluff or not didn't matter. The threat was real. And the sickest part? A small piece of me felt relief at the idea. No more pretending, no more guilt, just the truth. However, devastating it might be. But I couldn't let him be the one to tell it. That night, I waited until Thomas was sitting in his chair, glasses low on his nose, reading the paper with that same contented stillness I used to find so comforting. I sat across from him, hands folded tightly in my lap. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, concerned. "What is it?" I told him everything. Not in detail, but honestly enough. The conversations, the kiss, the confusion, the shame. I didn't try to justify it. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just told the truth. Thomas didn't say a word until I finished. When he finally did speak, his voice was calm, but hollow. "I trusted you," he said. I trusted him. "I know," I whispered. He rose slowly, placed the paper on the table, and left the room. Moments later, I heard the sharp edge of his voice in the hallway. Richard replied, defensive, then angry, then silent. The front door opened, then slammed. Just like that, Richard was gone. Thomas didn't speak to me for 2 full days. He moved through the house like a ghost, as if my presence were something he could step around. And I let him, because I deserved it. On the 3rd morning, he sat beside me at the table and spoke without looking up. "I don't know what happens next, but I need time." I nodded. "Take all the time you need." Now, the silence between us isn't filled with lies or stolen moments. It's filled with pain, but also truth. A foundation shaken, but not yet broken. I don't know if Thomas will ever forgive me. I don't know if I can even forgive myself. But I do know this. Infidelity doesn't always begin with lust. Sometimes it begins with loneliness, with silence, with a look that lasts too long, and once that line is crossed, there's no returning to who you were before.